on the 2025 season. And today, however, we are coming your way with another very interesting conversation just because International Women's Day is or was around the corner. That's March 8, 2025. I am Ni Latte. Thank you so much for joining us again on the OXFAM Tax Dialogue. Stay with us. When we come back, I'll tell you what the topic for discussion is, who I have here with me, and why it's so important for us to talk about this subject matter this time around. Do stay tuned in. Grateful for staying. So just like I mentioned, today is all about gender and taxation. Yes, gender and taxation. I'm sure you know it's a very interesting conversation. We are looking at the intersection when it comes to gender and tax policies. And I have two fine brains with me here to really help us with this particular topic. My name is Ni Latte. Thank you for joining me. And today I have with me Rosemond Asante, who is Vice Chairperson of the Society for Women in Taxation. Mrs. Asante, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to have you on the platform today.
Great to be here.
Right. Next to her is Isaac Danso-Ejui. He is a lawyer as well as a policy analyst. Isaac, thank you for joining us as well.
Thanks for having me.
Is it fair to say Happy International Women's Day?
In advance.
We are really appreciating the achievements of women, for which reason we are talking about gender and taxation today on the OXFAM Tax Dialogue. Well, a very interesting topic, I must say, and reading around, I realized that there is so much that we need to do when it comes to bridging what has become known as perhaps the inequality, the biases, or the discrimination when it comes to tax policies. And so let's begin with a very quick exercise. All over the world, when it comes to tax policies, which category of persons bear the brunt or bear the impact? Is it men or women? Interesting, I have one man here and one woman here, so we'll see how the conversation will go. So let me begin with our Vice Chairperson for the Society for Women in Taxation. Women or men at the receiving end?
Taxation in general is gender neutral. Okay, so when governments impose taxes on incomes, goods and services, they are not really targeted at any gender.
Right.
They are rather targeting those generating the income. But then implicitly, some of the tax policies impact negatively on men or women, but most often on women. Hardly on men. Men, they enjoy a lot of incentives, but most often women bear the brunt because there are lots of women in the informal sector. There are a lot of women who are also caregivers. They are not working. And when you talk about consumption taxes, most women are the end consumers and they bear the brunt. So I think that it weighs heavily.
Taxation is generally gender neutral, but when it comes to the impact, it's slightly tilted towards the implicit impact, slightly tilted towards women. Is it the same sentiment you share? Because it appears little attention is paid to the gender biases when it comes to taxation, and so why is it so important for us to look at some of these issues?
Thanks, and it's important for us to look at the gender angle of taxation because, as Rosemond said, tax generally, one of the fundamental principles of a good tax system is its neutrality. And gender neutrality is one aspect of tax neutrality, which is that we are not looking at whether you are male or female. What we are looking at is that you've made a certain level of income, and for that level of income, this is the amount of tax you are supposed to contribute to the national kitty. And so that is right. Now, on the face of that, it appears that, we are at par. Right. But then when you bring the socioeconomic, sort of factors, men and women face different socioeconomic, conditions in society. So when you just oppose that with the neutral tax, then you begin to see that, women in some instances are a bit burdened, overburdened with taxes compared to their male counterparts. In certain instances, you also find that men bear a bit more in terms of the taxes. So if you look at it, for example, on the average, men earn more than women. And so if you look at in absolute terms, men will pay more taxes because they earn more in a progressive society where we have progressive taxes. Because there's men earn more, they will contribute more to taxes than women. We can look at it in other forms in terms of pensions, contributions, and even benefits. There's this analogy that is given, for example, that because women on average live longer than men, if two people, a man and a woman, work same role and same level of income, make the same amount of contribution to social security, it is likely that the woman will benefit more because she will live longer than the man. So it has to be. We look at this, neutrality, gender, tax neutrality, and how it affects. You look at it at a whole of system approach. Just don't look at it at individual tax level. If you look at it that way, then you may be tempted to go for knee-jerk, sort of responses. But as a whole, how are you balancing, equality and making sure that, the word is how are you getting equity so that both genders are, supported in appropriate
It's
way.
really interesting how you bring the point of equity. That takes me to my next question, for example. And so if you are to unpack this whole concept of gender and taxation, what elements are we looking at? Is it just about equity, or we are also more concerned about issues like biases and discrimination, for example? Really unpack the whole concept for us, Isaac.
Certainly, the point with tax and gender is that on the face of it, we've in the past, tax is usually it's a product of the society, right? It's a product of the times in which those laws were made. In the past, you've had times where places like the UK, in Switzerland, most part of Europe, you have women not having property rights, and some of them until not too distant, past, were not allowed to even do work. If you are working, you are doing so on the permission of your husband, and all that you earn comes back to your husband, right? So taxes in those times did not have to bother really about gender parity and equity. How do we factor that? But society has since
so much about those areas.
Exactly. So society has since moved from that. We have women actively forming 50%, maybe more in some societies. What we're trying to say is that beyond the face of it, let's look at how the socioeconomic factors impact women. How does it affect men? And how do we put in measures to make sure that no one gender suffers disproportionately due to no fault of theirs because, someone wants to just impose a gender-neutral tax? I'll give a classic example in Ghana, which has been our mobile levy, Momo tax, for example, e-levy. E-levy, again, gender-neutral. If you make a transaction on a daily basis, 100 cedis, anything above that, you pay 1%. Once you send it, and whether you are male, female, whichever gender you associate with, you pay, right? But we also know that we have a very huge informal sector in the country, and the informal sector is predominantly women. So they use more of Momo transactions, and so when you have a tax like this, you have women contributing more by way of Momo. So what do you do in a situation like that? Are you going to say that, okay, taxes by nature has to be also easy. It has to be easy to implement and collect. So you don't want to put algorithms. Okay, if the sender is a woman, then the tax should be 0.5 or something like that. How do you do that? There have been suggestions. For example, okay, we will take the money. Everyone who sends is going to pay the 1%, but of the total revenue you're going to get from mobile money taxation, e-levy, 50% of that is set aside for, say, a women guarantee or women fund.
I want you to hold your thought briefly for me because I think you are really going into the box for me. But just so we have a very, understanding conversation, I just want to come back to Rosemond and then find out from her, because you had earlier mentioned, for example, e-levy as one of the taxes when it comes to, gender and taxation, but more specifically and in the context of Ghana, aside what Isaac has mentioned, are there specific taxes? Because in your initial submission, for example, I heard you talk about consumption tax, which, for example, VAT, for example.
Exactly.
And so aside from VAT, aside from e-levy, the informal sector, how it plays out over there, are there specific taxes that you think are disproportionate when it comes to women? And how did you even get there in the first place?
Well, in terms of the taxes, as I indicated earlier, taxation is gender neutral. So even for the personal income tax rates, they are also gender neutral. But then, like Isaac mentioned, when you talk about the informal sector, it's predominantly dominated by, women. So there's a need for us to balance, look at the tax rates, even in the informal sector, and how it's impacting on women. And going back to consumption taxes, I think there's a discussion that it generated a lot of interest a year or so ago. Has to do with the menstrual hygiene, taxation.
The taxes on sanitary pads.
Exactly, the taxes on sanitary pads. And for me, I think this is very key, and I'm happy that the government waived taxes on it. Because assuming you go to the market, right? And then there's bottled water, there's sachet water. I look at the bottled water, I look at the price, I can't afford. So I'll opt for sachet water. But you're talking about sanitary pads here. There's no other option.
Yeah.
There's no hygienic option to sanitary pads.
The alternatives are not there.
No, they are not there. So we have to use it. So if we are taxing sanitary pads, then it means that we are burdening the women, especially those in the informal sector, and also our girls in schools. So it's important that the government looked at it and waived the taxes on locally manufactured, I'm stressing that, locally manufactured sanitary pads. Because for me, well, we need to do some studies, but to waive taxes on imported sanitary pads, at the end of the day, if we don't take care, we'll end up distorting the market.
The market.
They will end up very cheap on our markets, and the locally manufactured ones will be very expensive. We'll end up crowding out the industry, and people will end up losing jobs. So there are ripple effects when it comes to taxation in terms of gender-sensitive issues. But the bottom line is to conduct thorough study. Let's do a gender impact analysis on every tax policy that we are churning out. What is the effect or the end impact on women, and how will it also affect men? And then we can tailor the policy in such a way that it will not discriminate in excess, and then everybody will be happy.
Let's call for a gender impact assessment on tax policies in the country. That's the word from Rosemond Asante, Vice Chairperson of the Women in Society for Taxation. She is here with Isaac Danso-Ejui, who is a lawyer as well as a policy analyst. He's taking us on a break here on the OXFAM Tax Dialogue as we look at gender and taxation. I am Nila Telati. Don't go away. When we come back, we'll be looking at the impact and how we can develop gender-responsive tax policies right here in Ghana. Welcome back. This is the OXFAM Tax Dialogue here on 97.3 CTFM and Channel 1 TV. I am Ni Lati. Today we are delving into gender and taxation. My guest, Rosemond Asante, Vice President, Society for Women in Taxation, as well as Isaac Danso-Ejui. He is a lawyer as well as a policy analyst. We are continuing the conversation. I continue with you, Rosemond, because you were really making some interesting points before we went on that short break. But a two-in-one question for you. Really, when you talk about the impact of some of these, gender-based taxation policies, what really is the impact on women, to be specific? And also, are there challenges that women face when it comes to complying with the existing laws that we have in the country, for which reason maybe perhaps the challenge or the impacts or the burden is really on them? I hope my question is clear.
Yeah.
All right, sure. Answer for me.
So to start with the impact, I think it affects women adversely in terms of their disposable incomes. because like I said, they are the end consumers, so they tend to spend more. If there's an increase in VAT, automatically prices increase, and thereafter, you need to spend more on certain products. And then also, looking at the informal sector, okay, as I mentioned, there are lots of women in the informal sector. So looking at an example, using the flat tax rate scheme, okay, it's a general tax across board, okay. So it does not really discriminate as to whether Akosia Mansa has a turnover of 1,000, Kofi has 1,005, Ekuya has 300. Perhaps they are all in the same range, and then we slap a flat rate on them. That way, somebody is going to be disadvantaged. And invariably, there are women there who will be disadvantaged. So that's why I keep on saying that it's always good to start with research. Let's do our homework well. You look at gender disaggregated data and then conduct the impact assessment so that we can gauge the effect of every tax policy before it's enacted and implemented.
Right. And what about a bit on the challenges that women face in complying with some of these tax policies?
Yes.
What loopholes do you see?
Most women in the informal sector are not so educated, okay? So then some of them may not really have access or knowledge of the specific tax laws.
Right.
So they may not know that when you pay your taxes at the end of the year, you are supposed to file your returns, and in doing so, you can also even apply for tax reliefs. They are not aware. And they may not also know certain incentives in the particular sectors that they operate. So that is why I think JRA has been doing a lot of tax education, which is good. Society of Women in Taxation, we've also been doing a lot of tax education at the market, sensitizing the women, improving their knowledge on taxation, how to pay the taxes, the benefits associated with paying of the taxes, and also the penalties, so that they can have an idea as to the taxes that they need to pay, why they have to pay. Because if you don't know why you have to pay and you don't know what is being used for, people will not comply.
I see, but with these incentives that you talk about, even aside from the fact that they may not even know about them, how accessible are they?
Talking about the tax reliefs, it's accessible to every taxpayer, resident taxpayer, but you need to file your returns. At the end of the year, you need to file your returns with the Ghana Revenue Authority. There's a form that you complete, and then you indicate the type of relief that you're applying for. We have marriage or responsibility relief, and it's granted to individuals who are married and taking care of their spouse and or 2 children.
Wow.
But the caveat is that when one person applies for the relief, the other party cannot apply for it. So here, I think maybe we can, JRA or the policymakers should be able to look into it in such a way that both parties will be able to apply. We also have child education relief. If you are taking care of your children in registered and recognized educational institutions, you are given a grant, an allowance for up to 3 children. So both parents, you cannot claim in respect of the same child. So if you have 6 children, the father can claim for 3 and the mother can claim for 3. But if you have 4 and somebody claims for 3, means the other can claim for 1. The other one, yes.
Well, to you, Isaac, very interesting point Madam Vosmond raises over there. But look at the fact that we want to raise revenue. However, we are being mindful that we don't unnecessarily overburden the marginalized or the vulnerable in society. So my question to you is, if we give all the support to the women and we leave the men, are you not disadvantaging the men and also widening the gap that we are complaining about already?
Well, good question. I think that we are not necessarily overburdening men, by giving opportunity to women or giving incentives to women. I mean, there's a lot of research that actually shows that in societies where women are given some of these incentives, are given some of these resources so that they have money, those societies are more equal. Children tend to do more because women generally tend to spend more of their income in the house. They buy food, they buy education, and children go to school and all of these things, you know, compared to households where the income is solely from the men, you know. So there's something to be gained, you know, as a society as a whole, if we are able to, you know, incentivize, you know, women in particular through tax incentives and also through, you know, dedicated, you know, funds for women that support women and female entrepreneurship. You know, you want to empower women. Constitutes 50% approximately of our population. You know, you don't want to be building a country with 50% of your capacity. You know, you want to build, you know, your best foot forward with 100% of your capacity, 50% men, everybody empowered, you know, and actually contributing to raising, you know, domestic revenue, building the society that we all want.
So for a sector like agri, for example, if you are to soften your stance and then make some amendment to the tax administration over there, and then you are giving some exemptions, so even in a sector which is predominantly dominated by men, and you give exemptions over there, it's likely the women, the few women over there are going to suffer. That's the picture you paint.
So what I'm saying here is, and I like the example of agriculture, I'm saying that let us even go beyond sectoral sort of incentives. So there's incentives for agriculture, incentives for agro-processing manufacturing. Can we have incentives for women-founded, women-led organizations and small-scale businesses?
Or women entrepreneurs in general.
Can we have a 5-year, 10-year tax holiday for women-led? Can we, if women go into agriculture or manufacturing, women-founded, women-led organizations, and this thing, can we give them something extra than the general, you know, just to encourage women to really do? Because, you know, the impact of, you know, this inherent bias, you know, against, you know, women is that they are more likely to just rather give up on actually working because they have responsibilities, taking care of their home and stuff like that. So they rather, if I'm going to work, I'm not going to get a lot of money. How much, before head it, you ask your wife, your mother, how much are they paying you? How much do you bring home? If it's not much, just stay home. I'll pay you that, and you take care of the kids and home. You know, but we don't want this. We want women to be in the workforce. We want women to rise to the very top of their career and contribute fully to the building of the country. And this is why this is not just about women. It is about the society. It is about Ghana and trying to build a country with all our best foot, you know, forward.
Very well. So the next question will be, how do we develop gender responsive, you know, tax policies for our country? Maybe one person will look at what other countries are doing that we can tap into, and then one other person will look at the structural changes or reforms, the shifts that we need to see. I don't know who wants to take what. Do I?
It's in academia. Let's look at the structural changes.
Then you look at what other countries are doing. That's okay. So the floor is yours now.
So moving beyond Ghana, we go to our brothers from Nigeria. They are also exempting locally manufactured sanitary pads as well as baby food. Okay, locally manufactured.
The emphasis here is
but then
locally
let's
manufactured.
move to Kenya, East Africa. They waived taxes on sanitary pads as far back as 2004.
Wow, that's over 2 decades ago.
Yes, and in addition to that, they have waived on locally manufactured sanitary products as well as imported sanitary products. And to add to it, they have also committed to providing free sanitary pads to girls in public schools. And there's always a budget line for that. And this is also being done in South Africa as well. So they are also providing free sanitary pads to girls in public schools. If you move to Tanzania, Tanzania is a bit of a mix. That is why I'm saying that when it comes to Ghana, looking at the removal of taxes on imported sanitary products, we need to tread cautiously. Because in 2018, Tanzania introduced exemption on sanitary products and reimposed in 2019 based on the research they conducted. So it's very important that we do our homework well. Let's find out what the exact situation is before we do the implementation. And then if you move to Korea has an incentive for SMEs who rehire women after childbirth.
Wow.
It could be that maybe they have an issue where when you go and deliver, you don't get your job back.
Yeah.
So maybe to address that challenge, they have something like that. I don't know about Ghana, whether we have any such research to indicate that we also have that problem. So that's what some countries are doing. And then you look at India. India provides a discount on tax stamp for women who want to register their land, just to encourage people to register land. Yes.
So for you, it's more about the homegrown solutions, find our context and what will work for us, drawing lessons from all these areas that you have spoken about.
Exactly. And as Isaac indicated, it should be a more holistic approach. So not only at the tax policies, but even looking at tax administration, looking at tax policy. How many women occupy top executive positions in our tax administrations? How many women are into tax policy? So those are some of the issues that we need to look at.
You see, Rosemont was answering a bit of your question. So I'm giving you 60 seconds just to tell me about how we can reverse the trend.
I think we're already on a good road as a country, Ghana. At least we don't have any explicitly biased tax against women in our system, which is a good start. What we can do better is for us to, one, and Rosemont intimated this, let's have a gender-based analysis, as part of every tax policy, fiscal policy that we present to Parliament. As part of the memo, how does this affect, the genders, and what are we doing to deal with that, This is a basic requirement, which you have it, not just probably as part of tax policy, but almost every law that we're going to have in this country. That is one. Two, let's move into specifics. We have incentives that we give to women. I have already mentioned, can we, for example, set up a fund? This tax is on e-levy. If it survives this budget, can we agree that we are setting a part of it, 50%, 20%, whatever amount, to set up a fund? I know government has mentioned that the Women Development Bank, I'm not too sure, given the informal nature of the work that women do, whether a development bank necessarily will meet their needs and whether they will satisfy their requirements. But is it right thinking? A fund that is dedicated to women, that supports them, give them technical support, that gives them funding support, to grow and scale their businesses would be a good one. I am thinking that we could, for example, childcare products, and the things that household staff that women would typically spend their money on, healthcare, childcare products, Medicare, especially maternal healthcare, and childcare health services. Those things should, let's give very good exemptions. And then for working women who having their household responsibilities, looking after children, still manage to work and contribute, can we give an incentive to them so that, the expenses they incur at home, let's give them some deduction.
All right.
Actually, when we are computing their income tax, as an incentive so that people don't go on maternal leave and I don't want to go back to work. We want them back at work, to contribute.
Thank you very much. I told you that this was going to be a very interesting conversation and really tough recommendations for policymakers to chew on. And this only happens on the OXFAM Tax Dialogue right here on 97.3 CTFM as well as Channel 1 TV. It's been another episode. I'm Nila Telate. Thank you so much for tuning in. The next time we meet, we'll be talking about property taxation.